Hey, Sydney, thank you
Yeah,
for being with me. I really, you're a rock star. I hope you know it, but I see it and I appreciate you being with me today and the work you do.
well, thank you for having me and thank you for what you do. Right back at you.
So, just as we start, um, if you don't mind, just share. I mentioned you kind of before I hit record. One thing I noticed about you is, even on your personal social media accounts, you use that as a platform to be a voice for people, to be an advocate, to stand up for the greater good. And I know we're going to get into some real nuts and bolts here and talk about some
Mhm,
very important details on things today with domestic abuse
mhm.
specifically. But I'm just curious, like generally for you, that's noticing those leadership things in you. When did you start kind of noticing that? Like, I mean, in my mind, I can see you as like a kid on the playground that's like, but tell us a little bit of your story if you don't care.
Yeah, it's absolutely something that I was, raised to believe and feel, that, helping others is important. Grew up in a really loving, incredible house, parents that, cared for each other, cared for us, and cared for the community. They volunteered with local nonprofits. They served in
Mm,
church. They were youth group leaders. They tithed. They donated to places in need. So that was just part of life. That was normal.
yeah.
Like we had enough. We didn't have abundance, but we had what we needed. We saved, and we were also giving and doing what we could to help others. And so, from a very young age, I was raised. That's what we did. And we were very lucky. We were very blessed with what we did have, and not everyone lived that way. And so
Yeah.
I remember being very young and, as you grow up, after high school, people say, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to go and study at college? And I never could identify something specific. It was, I want to do something that's helping people. Like that was, I remember having conversations. People were like, well, there's probably not money in that, being a social worker in different positions. And in my mind, it was, but that's what matters. And that's what really drives me. And so that has really driven me kind of through my career. I've been in a couple of different types of positions, but they've all been really helping people in some way,
Yeah.
whether it's at a nonprofit or even at, an assisted living facility. I was the admissions director. It was like working with, I had 80 grandparents every day going to
Mm,
work. And I was basically helping them or their families in some way find a solution for, a care needs that they had, programming a remote if they needed that, figuring something out of their
yeah.
home, and helping them sort clothes because they didn't need anymore, figuring that out. So always been in a role. And if I wasn't helping someone, I really felt like I needed to then also put my time personally into that.
Mm,
So if I, as my roles changed or as my ability to help people in my job changed, I want to make sure I was doing that in some way. It's just always been a part of who I am. And I also think, I do have a place of privilege by my skin
yeah.
color, my socioeconomic status, the connections and relationships that I have to people and those in the community. And I know I need to raise up my voice and speak out against things that are important. And if I feel strongly about something, even if I feel just a little bit strongly about
Yeah.
something and I want to share about it, then I will do that. So I think it's important. I think so many issues, and the one that we're going to talk about today, really thrives because people are silent about it.
Yeah.
So we have to talk about it. We have to break down stigmas and
Yeah.
support each other because it's happening, and ignoring it or just turning a blind eye to it makes it worse.
Mm, you're so right. Okay, so let's jump in. I think, like I said before, this is hopefully one of many times that you'll come and share. But I kind of think today, let's use this as let's really define a lot of terms.
Mhm.
Let's do a lot of education today. And I know you do this all the time, so I'm just going to kind of back up and let you roll with that, and then
Yeah.
I'll interject.
Yeah. So, the issue being domestic violence, people sometimes refer to that as relationship abuse, intimate partner. You can call it different things, but the important thing to know is it's happening within that intimate relationship, right? So people who are married or living together, have children together, and where things are happening where one person wants power and control over their partner, right? So they're using different tactics. It changes over time. We have to identify what those different tactics are, understand what those different types of abuse are. So frequently it's considered physical abuse. You think back, people used to call, so my sister's house is the local resource for domestic violence victims, and people call it a battered women's shelter. And that's super problematic because we're really limiting the scope of who we're helping, right? It's not just women, men are experiencing this as well. And battering is, denotes physical violence. And so we're not just talking about physical violence. We have to understand it's a range of behaviors. It starts with what we say and how we act. And it ranges all the way through up to, severe physical violence or even homicide. So we have to look at it and say, this is what's occurring. We know in our community, generally 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men experience physical violence in their relationship at some point. And on average, South Carolina has about 50 lives lost to domestic violence. And that's not actually counting children or other, innocent bystanders who are impacted by that violence as well. We know many times when a life is lost, there is potentially a suicide by the abuser. So an additional life lost. There might be, children, could be multiple children who are also killed. And that's just, it's devastating for families. It's devastating for the fabric of our community. And we know that, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, those other types are happening much more often. We have numbers around lives lost. That's different. We don't have numbers on those other types of abuse. So as I said, it starts with what we say and how we act. So it starts really early in relationships, typically where someone is being really intense, really overbearing and saying that they love them within, a few weeks, right? Which could be flattering for some people, depending on your relationship history and who you are. It could be flattering to be told I love you and I can't imagine my life without you. And so then to hear things like that, maybe then to hear things like, well, I don't like it when you wear certain clothes, or I don't like it when you wear that makeup, or, I know that friend of yours has this reputation and maybe it's not the best for you to be hanging out with them. So starting to use your words and to be manipulative in some way, whether it's about a person's appearance, who they're spending time with, how they're feeling about themselves.
It's really like that initial hook of like, I love you so much. And then that person feels like someone really cares for me and loves me. And then some of these kind of initial control tactics can be framed with, because I care for you so much, I'm going to keep you isolated, or I'm gonna,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the attempts to isolate, whether that's social or, a geographic isolation, like moving away and saying for my job, or, you're the only person I need in the world, right? It's you and me against the world. You're the only person I need. And, physically moving away from family for whatever reason. But then also, just not having conversations over the phone or, seeing them in person. When we have a social support, when we have that support system, we can see when someone's mood changes, right? If my sister had something going on in a relationship that, even if she didn't tell me, it would likely impact her mood. It would impact the interactions that we had. I would maybe witness interactions between her and her spouse. And, I could say, you seem different lately. What's going on? Is everything okay? But when I don't see them as often and I am more disconnected, or I'm not as comfortable speaking to them, or I don't see them at all, right? It's harder to recognize that. So, people who are using abusive behaviors are really specific, and they know what they're doing, and they know it's easier to control someone if they don't have that support system, or if they're always present, right? So that's another kind of warning sign. If you never see someone without their partner, right? It's great to do things together, but it's, important in a healthy relationship. We still have some independence and time that we spend alone or with friends or family, without our partner always being right there with us.
Yeah.
So
let's go through. I mean, a lot of these things are rooted in control, but let's
Yep.
just kind of give a list of different categories. And
Yeah.
me, like as a psychotherapist, like I'm thinking through, like, and I think we can get into this a little bit later, but sometimes we have this picture in our mind of the abuser as like just, it's just really easy to detect,
Mhm.
that, right. And so it's not, from the outside looking in, and that person may not be quote unquote a bad person, but it's like
Right.
there's so much trauma that's unhealed,
Mhm. Yeah.
within that all of these, just extreme protectors come up for that person.
Does
And it's
not.
like, I have to control everything in my environment, and that includes you, or I don't feel safe.
Right. Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to that. So, but let's go through like kind of the different areas. We've talked about physical violence as a way to
Yep.
control. We've talked about kind of isolating. What are some other things that we see?
Yeah. Yeah. So verbal abuse is really how we see that, starting with emotional abuse. So the manipulation, the guilting into certain actions, making you feel bad for things, making you feel bad for wanting to spend time with friends or family, making you feel bad if you were pursuing a career and that took time away from them. We see abuse happening within finances, so control around
controlling them,
money.
yeah.
So whether that's giving someone an allowance or not allowing anyone access, or making them account for where they've spent money. And again, this is kind of a tricky one, especially when we think about, managing a household. One person typically manages the finances. It's one thing to manage them and like file the taxes and pay the bills and oversee that. It's another to restrict access, right? So
Yeah.
you might say, and I've had people say that before, like, well, I don't do the bills. I don't know what's in the bank account every day. I don't pay our taxes. I don't, pay attention to that. But do you have a debit card? Like, could you go and get yourself something if you needed it? You're not having to ask permission or explain why you did this, right? You still
Right.
have access, and you can do that. So finances, we see this happening within a sexual relationship, which is, I think, so difficult to, it's hard enough to talk about issues within a relationship. It's even harder to talk about your, romantic, like your sex life with your partner. But want to consider, at a very basic level, I've said this a billion times, every single person on this planet is worthy of being loved and safe, both emotionally and physically, and respected. And that needs to be in every area of your relationship. Even in the bedroom, when you are private with your partner, they should be respecting your wishes. We should understand consent. You're not in the mood. You're not in the mood. No is a complete sentence. No means no. My 4-year-old says that. Mom, no means no. All right. Good job, girl. Like, we got this. We're going to keep learning about this. And, but it's still the expectation of, I need to please my partner. I need to do this, whether it's a special occasion, whether it's just expected, whether they want that. And, we have to respect each other at all levels. But it's really difficult to discuss. And, I think, when I've talked with people, almost every single time when they told me about other types of abuse, they're also being sexually assaulted by a partner on a regular basis, which is just incredibly degrading. And it also layers on the guilt of, this person is supposed to love me. They're doing things that are just incredibly hurtful and embarrassing and demeaning, and trying to wrap your head around, the abuse separate from the love. They try to separate things out and say, well, it's not all bad. They still want me physically, but it's like, well, it's not in a healthy way. And, and someone might feel guilty. Maybe they're in a relationship, and they say, well, we've already, been intimate, and I don't feel like I can leave the relationship because of that. I've been with this person for so long. I can't start over and do this all over again. When in reality, it's, you've been with that person for 20 years.
Right.
Do you want to spend the next 40 experiencing abuse in an unsafe situation without being loved and respected? I would say a single day over that realization is too long, to get help, and you're really best to seek services. So verbal, emotional, sexual, financial, we said spiritual abuse.
Yeah.
using someone's faith against them, or using scripture to justify the abuse, mocking someone's faith if they are not of the same faith. But what we see quite often too, and I know you've seen this as well, is, scripture being twisted, someone's faith being used to keep them in that relationship, to be submissive, or to, uphold that marriage instead of upholding someone's safety and well-being, which, so.
And with all of these, I see a common thread of just a diminishing of self. It's like I can't trust I can't. It's like a slow chipping away of, I can't trust my own voice. I can't trust my own body. I can't trust my own thoughts on this. Kind of an increase in, I'm not capable in this area, so I need to give over control.
Right.
Yeah.
The whole time, really, as it starts with the verbal abuse, someone is belittling their partner, right? They're belittling them. They're telling them they're not good enough. They are, horrible things like maybe, no one else is going to want them because of their looks or because of any other personalities or characteristics that they may have. And so someone feeling less than, right? That's a kind of a foundational piece of that, because if you are a strong, confident person, you say, I know I'm worthy of being loved and respected. I know what I bring to the table. And someone is rude to you, the response is very different. And say, well, that's not kind to say that. Maybe we're very direct and we're able to say, why would you talk to me like that? That's disrespectful, and any other thing you might say. Or you just flat out say, that's a deal breaker. This relationship is over, right? Like date 2, we're not going anywhere else. This is done. But if you don't believe you're worthy of being loved and respected, if you don't have that self-confidence and understand your worth and the value that you have, whether that's because you grew up in a household where you weren't loved and respected and taught how to treat others, maybe were hurt in past relationships, there's a number of things that can lead up to, a 15-year-old girl just who is existing, might have reduced self-confidence based on what she's experiencing. There's a lot of things going on. And so that person who is treated that way maybe doesn't have the support to speak to them and help them through that, or maybe doesn't recognize that it's wrong, starts to be controlled more and more easily. They say, well, I am, like we said, I am glad to have this attention. I'm glad to have this person who wants to be with me and says these things to me. I'll take the good with the bad, right? I'll take these two things together because I am flattered, and it's worth it to spend all of my time with the person, or it's worth it to sacrifice other things to have this relationship. And so again, that's where we have to talk about these things, because it's thriving with a lack of understanding. It's thriving with misperceptions about relationships. The boys will be boys comment, or like, that's just puppy love. That's how they're all about each other. They're obsessed with each other. They're, something straight out of a romantic comedy, which, I could also go off on romantic comedies.
I'm like, memos, right?
Like negative messages.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And it's like, no, like, first of all, I've got 2 girls. They are wild as heck. Like girls will be girls, and she's, hanging from the rafters. Like, that's silly. We shouldn't say that. Boys and girls can act well behaved. Boys and girls can act out. We can do different things. We say, boys are sometimes angry and aren't taught how to express that emotion. Girls are sometimes sad and labeled this, right? Like, we all experience these emotions. How do we express them in a healthy way? How do we support each other through this? And then seek to build healthy relationships, because by ignoring this issue, we're allowing it to continue. And it's just going through generation after generation. And I think we could all honestly say, like, would you want to pass on any number of these maybe less desirable traits or personality, things that we have? Like, no, we wouldn't want to actively do that. But we're not actively trying to make things better sometimes. Gotta talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking as you're talking, and this is probably another conversation we can have on another day and go deeper, but I think just with the church, like impurity culture and all the victim blaming and all the, it's the responsibility of girls to like dress a certain way and act a certain way, because boys are just boys. Like, they're not in control of their like thoughts and emotions and feelings. We've got to we've got to protect their, I mean, how many times did I hear, you got to protect his eyes,
Oh yeah.
like, come on. So there are just all these like memos, even as Christians, that we've been given,
Absolutely.
like in the last
Right.
whatever years, that we just need to pop in the shredder.
Agree. 100%. Right.
So that's another podcast episode.
That's a whole episode.
Okay, so let's go into, I like to maybe break down 3 different categories. So let's talk first to, because this is something I feel like I deal with a lot. It takes a while, I think, to help somebody understand that they are in an abusive relationship.
Mhm.
So let's talk to the people who are dealing with kind of these sloppily of emotions. We've been gaslighted, and we gaslight ourselves, like when we're in these situations, right?
Yeah.
So our first category is, I'm talking to the abused person. And
Mhm.
what if how do I know, like, how can I identify those triggers within myself to, like, start to, and then what can I do?
Yeah.
And then our second category, I think, is friends. How
Same.
do I recognize this in a friend?
Right.
And
Right.
then let's talk to churches.
Okay.
Third category.
Okay. Yes. Someone is, so we know that this person is experiencing abuse, and we're trying to talk to them about it.
Let's
Essentially.
say I am the person, and I
Yeah.
am just kind of wrestling through, and I'm
Yeah.
starting to wonder within myself, like,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
this an abusive relationship, or is it all
Yeah.
in my head, or
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's some things that we want to look for, both positive and then negative to help us identify. In an unhealthy relationship, the abusive partner is volatile, right? So they're unpredictable with their emotions. We don't know, kind of have a walking on eggshells feeling to share things with them. If we've had a tough day, we need to talk to them about something. We have to kind of feel that out and see, if it's a bad day, we might not bring it up because the emotions are unpredictable, and we're not sure how they're going to react. And they could become more physical with an outburst, throw something, yell at you, or be intimidating in some way.
So that hypervigilance, that like I feel like I'm constantly preparing the environment at all times to help to regulate this person's emotions.
Yes.
And it's never my job to regulate somebody else's emotions.
Correct. We only have control over ourselves, and we need to recognize, like, what is our reaction, and as a healthy person within that relationship, with a healthy person just in general, we have to say, like, things are going to make you angry. What you do with that anger is your responsibility, and there are positive and negative ways to express that. And so, identifying the emotion and then healthy expressions. But abusers will often maybe fly off the handle or do things, but then also blame other people for their actions. So if someone is constantly blaming other people, not taking responsibility for their own actions, that's a big red flag. If someone is, again, belittling, putting you down, is unkind frequently, right? In a healthy relationship, we should be kind to each other. You love each other. You're spending time together for a reason. They shouldn't be saying hurtful things to you, right? At all, right? And they should recognize our level for, the need for independence, right? In a healthy relationship, we're independent. We do things together, obviously, but we also have time where you could, go to a yoga class, go take a walk on the beach, or go play basketball with friends, or do something without the constant supervision, the constant checking in. Is someone always on their phone? Are you afraid to miss a phone call or a text message because you don't know how they're going to react, or they're going to think that you're doing something wrong, right? So that constant assumption or fear that you're going to get in trouble, or that person's going to be mad at you, and you have to check in.
There fear?
Yeah. Is there fear? Right. Absolutely. At a very basic level, like, is there fear in various ways? Is there, respect and consent within the physical relationship, and really across the whole relationship? Or is it one-sided and you feel like you need to go along with what that other person wants? Are you honest with each other, and do you trust each other? I think that's really important. If there's any kind of questioning there, I would, really encourage people to either self-reflect, or if you could safely, talk with the partner, because I think it's important too, and I've talked to people who say, well, you're just saying, this relationship is abusive, it's not worth saving, just to leave. And that's never my first response, and say, if someone is unsafe, if someone is being threatened, yes, we're going to move immediately to work to create a safe space for that person. But if there's there's a whole gray area of, between healthy and abusive, where we just might need to work on that relationship. And it's really going to depend on each person. Every person is different. Some people are more willing to recognize what they're doing within the relationship if it's not healthy. Others are less willing or in denial, or, overtly, continuing to act in that way. So I think the important thing too is to say, again, in a healthy relationship, we're still going to have conflict. The absence of conflict doesn't equal a healthy relationship. We're two different people. We're going to have conversations about things all the time. How we manage that conflict, how we talk about issues as they come up. Do we have open, honest conversations about things without name calling, without saying derogatory things, without yelling or raising our voices or acting intimidating in any way? So if you have something come up and you say, hey, can I talk to you about something? Like, this has been kind of on my mind, or this happened today and I was curious, what you think, or what can we do about this? What's your partner's response? Are they willing to listen? Are they respectful? Do they hear you? And how are you resolving that? Maybe it's agree to disagree. Maybe one person changes their mind. Maybe you say, this is what I feel really strongly and I'm not changing, and then how does that impact the relationship moving forward? So I think, how you were able to have those conversations is really quite indicative of what, the health of the relationship looks like. But yeah.
Absolutely. So talk about this next, let's say that I have a friend that I feel, okay, before we do that, sorry, I got ahead of myself.
Yeah.
What should this person do now? Okay, let's say that I have now kind of identified that I'm in an unsafe
I'm
situation.
concerned. Yeah.
I'm concerned. Okay, what are my steps?
I think the first thing is recognizing, there are resources and get help. Sister's House offers resources. If you're in Charleston, Dorchester, or Berkeley County, all of their resources and programs are completely free. They're confidential. So you can call their number. It's 843-744-3242. You can Google that. You can look up My Sister's House and find everything that they provide. But you can call and access individual counseling. You can access a support group. You can access, they have housing support. So whether you need immediate shelter, if you want to look for something more long-term or transitional, they can support through different relationships that they have there. They have case management to help kind of navigate the ins and outs. If, someone might need to be getting their kids enrolled in a new school if they are moving out of the area, or getting a new ID, or just, all of the life things that might come along with that can feel overwhelming. So case managers can help navigate that. There's also connections to financial resources to improve your financial literacy. Again, because we know the majority of folks experiencing abuse do not have the ability to manage their own funds, haven't had access in a long time. So again, it starts with a phone call. Those support groups and individual counseling are incredible resources. The team that provides those are really great. They're all offered online right now. That started because of COVID and has just continued because it's very accessible. The support groups are held at different times a day. They have one that is specifically for men. So it's just a safe space to be able to share your story, listen to us, participate in as much or as little as you'd like. And I think first thing is, ask for help and recognize there's nothing wrong with that. You haven't made a mistake. Someone else has made a mistake and hurt you, and you're just taking steps to protect yourself and your children. So
that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so second category would be it's a friend of mine. And I'm noticing, like you said before, like you're different, like something's off, right?
Yeah.
So what are some other things that might come up for me, and how do I navigate that?
Yeah. So I think, and I know as a friend who's been in this position, as the first thing that you might want to do is get them out of there, right? You might have a really quick, strong reaction and say, you have got to stop this relationship. You can't be doing this anymore. I think you want to stop and try, work through it and recognize if we jump in really strongly, it's possible we will have the exact opposite effect that we want to. If we jump in and we say, this person, this is a bad person, you shouldn't be with them, all of these things, we're labeling the person, we're demonizing that person, because of the manipulation, the potential grooming that person is experiencing, the love bombing, the cycle of abuse that they've been through. It's been up and down, up and down, up and down. They will likely jump to protect that abuser and stand up for them instead of the response, which is the self-realization of what they're experiencing and that it's not safe and potentially taking steps. So what we want to do is come at it from a place of exactly what I said earlier, like saying something really simple. I've noticed these changes in you, that this isn't like you, or, just saying like, is everything okay? Maybe there's something else totally different going on. Maybe there's a job situation or a health concern that they're not talking about. Then simply say, I've noticed these changes and I'm concerned about you. Is there anything you want to talk about? I'm here for you. And maybe the first time, second time, couple times, they say, no, everything's fine. I'm good. And so again, that could feel frustrating. I think for friends, it's important that we don't come on too strong and we don't light them off. We don't say, you've made your bed, now lie in it. We continue to let them know we're here for them. I'm not going to pressure you to do anything until you're ready. When someone leaves an abusive relationship, that is the most dangerous time for them. That period of time of actually leaving, and then for a few months to a year after is when we see the majority of severe injuries and even loss of life. So leaving a relationship that is dangerous or that is unhealthy is a really dangerous time, and we need to plan for that safely. So letting them know, and that's again, the education that we have can help us. It informs us and it allows us to have the conversation in a more streamlined, educated way. So we can say, maybe we overheard a conversation, or maybe we saw them constantly texting or constantly feeling like they had to respond to their phone and say, it worries me. It seems like this person is a little controlling. It seems like you're not able to spend time without them, or it seems like we're afraid you were missing a phone call, or, any number of other things that we've talked about. When we can we can label that behavior. We're not labeling the person. Like you said, abusers aren't all bad people. They're making bad choices and they've maybe been through a lot. They've maybe been through their own trauma that is unresolved and it's coming out in really dangerous ways. So we're not labeling that person. But we can say, this maybe doesn't seem like a safe person for you to spend time with, or they're not respecting you, and how, and really speaking to what we've seen, so that helps them identify that. And then knowing that you're a safe space, expressing your concern, allowing them to share at the pace they're comfortable, supporting them regardless of their decision as long as we can. Again, depending on our positions, right? So if you're a mandated reporter and you know that they have children, that's another ball game. You've got to, you might need to support them. It's not one of the categories, but if you are a mandated reporter and you're concerned about doing that, I think the best thing to do is to talk with that person and say, this law exists to protect you and your children. And there's reasons to support you. And here's what this process is going to look like. That is never an easy conversation. That is never an easy process to go through. I've done that a ton, but in the end, it's just bringing more resources to the table to support that family. And that's the goal.
Exists for a reason.
Exactly.
You're, as a mandated reporter, I don't think I've ever been in a situation where I've been like, gosh, I just can't wait to do that. Like, that's never, there's always like, man, but like you said, what is happening when we do that is we're opening up the door for this family to get the resources that they need, and to bring more voices into the situation, which is a good thing. I think another thing that came up for me just as you were talking about the friend thing is just, you didn't say it like this, but just being able to kind of check ourselves as friends, kind of like in the beginning, like, and not have that quick reaction, realize what's coming up for us in that moment, and to be able to kind of internally deal with that, like as we're helping that person.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, and if self-care is kind of buzzy and people talk about it and it's, all over the place. I think, if you are helping someone, if you are in any kind of job, or, I mean, really just as humans, like, we should take care of ourselves. That's not, you don't need to be in a specific job or place to do self-care. I think that we need to think about, what are the things that we're doing every day just to take care of ourselves? What are we putting in our body? Food, water, healthy messages. What are we listening to? Who are we spending time with? Especially doing that, if we're in stressful situations with family or friends.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this last category,
Mhm.
just as we're talking about how can the church, I'm just,
Mm.
one thing that came up for me practically is making sure that we have men and women, if we have like a prayer time or like a
Mhm.
ministry time, like we have men by themselves, women by themselves, so that people feel like they can go, rather than have like everything as a couple or only men or only women. We have different voices. What are some other things that kind of can create a safe environment? And then just practically, and then, I think some of the things with just even being a friend, like we just talked about, like slowing down our own emotions, trying not to like be a rescuer right away. But what are some things that you would say to ministry leaders who are listening to this? Yeah.
Can I grab it? For faith leaders, to someone that has come forward and is seeking help, I think it's a lot of the same information that we would say to a friend, right? They're in a position of power, they're in a different position, but they still should have the education and the knowledge to identify the terms, identify what they're experiencing. It really helps them best work for safety, and kind of the practical steps that person might need to take, whether it's accessing resources and things like that. And then creating that safe space for them and putting steps in place, because it's not just about that one person, it's also about the whole church that they're taking care of, right? And that we're guiding. And so I think it's important, without seeming like an alarmist, without, being dramatic. We're seeing, more and more mass shootings just across our board. But, we're looking at the links between a mass shooter and their violence against women specific, that typically that's a precursor to what has happened. The mass shooting is maybe, a result of someone leaving a relationship and that person feels like they'd lost everything. So that's their one final action, where there's been documented history of abuse within that person's past. So I think we need to also consider that, what do we do to protect the entire church body potentially? And what are we doing to create a safe space for this person here on campus? On the church campus, does the victim continue to attend church? Does the abuser come? Are they allowed to be there together? What does it look like? How are we identifying this?
Mhm.
And I think, the most important thing we're talking about, it's tough. There's no black and white. It's a range of human behavior. It's always changed. People's interactions and personalities are different. The situations that you might be in, whether it's a Wednesday night Bible study, a Sunday morning congregation service, other places at home, the dynamics are always changing. So we need to say, we have a plan, but we have these backup plans, and we have these other options for safety, and we're thinking on our feet, and we recognize we can't say this is our set plan and just follow that. Like, that's great, but you have to be ready to adjust and be flexible, because people are people, and things change. So being educated, create a safe space. So do you have men and women on your teams that are able to work with that person when they're coming in? How are we counseling them, and how are we working with them moving forward? And I know you've experienced this as well, where someone might be told, simply to, continue to submit, consider their actions, and, pray for the situation and move forward. But like we've said, we can't control other people. We can't change what other people are doing. And so we can't put the responsibility on the victim to fix the situation, to simply stay and pray when they are potentially in danger. So I think, it's important that we always consider, your faith is important. It's critically important to who, we are. You've made this, covenant, you've married someone. There is no marriage if one person dies. I mean, not to be dramatic, but why wouldn't we prioritize someone's health and well-being? both of these people need to be healthy and safe for this to be a healthy marriage. Like that's the goal, right? It's not just for the marriage to continue to exist.
And I would say there's no marriage if the person is also dying inside constantly. They might physically like still be there. But if they're a shell of a person because of this marriage, it's not a marriage.
No,
That
exactly.
is not a covenant.
Right, exactly. And so we need to consider each individual's health and well-being and safety in that relationship. And so how are we supporting them? And I think, in my experience in working with faith leaders is the response is typically, we don't want to maybe work with the local domestic violence agency because they only advocate for divorce. They never advocate for reconciliation. And, from that perspective, my sister's house as a resource is typically when someone is like really needing help and they are getting out of the relationship. That's their decision that they're making. We need to have a societal shift to recognize the abuse when it's early, right? We shouldn't be waiting until someone is physically in danger and fleeing and leaving 99% of their belongings to go to a confidential location, right? That should not be like an everyday occurrence. And that's where we are right now because we're not identifying it early and we're not supporting someone who's experiencing verbal or emotional abuse. That's just written off. It's not even taken seriously if someone even comes forward and asks for help with that. So, we need to say reconciliation can happen, but it must really come from the abuser taking steps really to create change. And that can't be forced. We don't know if that's going to happen. It's typically pretty unlikely. It's not impossible. I've absolutely seen it happen. But it takes significant, self-awareness and taking responsibility, which is, not typical of an abuser. And so what we often see from a church perspective is of course forgiveness and reconciliation, which is really dangerous if someone's not ready. It's really dangerous if the abuser has not identified the problems that they are causing and taken some steps to change that. Reconciliation and forgiveness do not have to be going hand in hand. They can happen separately, right? We can forgive someone but not reconcile. You might reconcile and not forgive. I would also say that that's probably not healthy if we're forcing a reconciliation without a true forgiveness. And, and that might happen on a really long timeline. You each have,
I was just thinking too. Yeah.
We might want it to happen and get that out together. And maybe there's kids and that's obviously a really difficult situation, but, forcing that on a specific timeline isn't safe. It needs to happen slowly and specifically and with change in their actions and behaviors.
Yeah. And with open hands on that if it doesn't, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's so big. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, so as we are kind of landing your plane here, is there anything that you feel like you wanted to say that you have not said?
Gosh, I tell me a lot, but I could talk about this all day long.
Yeah.
I think that the biggest thing, and is just I want people to know they're not alone. I want people to get help if they're questioning it. And I would just really encourage anyone who's listening who is like, I don't actually know that much about abuse within a relationship. I don't know that much about how to help someone or to recognize that, is to, dig in and educate yourself, because the rate that abuse is occurring, it's not if you know someone who is experiencing this, they just might be hiding it, or you're not recognizing it. So this is impacting us. People think, well, it's not happening in my church, or it's not happening in my neighborhood, or not in my family. And unfortunately, it does not, domestic violence does not discriminate, right? It does not follow socioeconomic classes, it doesn't follow education, it doesn't follow, skin color, anything like that. It's impacting everyone. This is a human issue. And I think, again, it's our responsibility to know about issues that are impacting the area. And so help your neighbor. educate yourself
Yes,
on
ma'am.
this, regardless of your field, regardless of what your profession is, or if you think you're going to be connected to this or not. And then especially for faith leaders who are, counseling people every single day and taking care of people and overseeing their spiritual lives. I would say when we think about our spiritual health and our physical health and our emotional health, all of those things are connected. We can't only focus on one of them.
Right.
Maybe you're a pastor, so you're an expert in that spiritual care. That's your primary area that you're working with that person. I would, someone came to you. I kind of use this example. If I were a primary care physician, right, and someone's coming to me for an annual checkup, or doing, all of the things, making sure everything is good. Someone comes to you and they have like an ongoing issue that's getting worse and worse and worse. I'm doing as much as I can, but at some point I'm going to refer them to a specialist, right? I'm going to say, this is related to your lungs or to your kidneys or to your brain or whatever. I refer you to a specialist, because that specialist can then go in and deeper and say, okay, it's brain cancer and we've got to do this, right? The primary care physician isn't going to be like, let's open that up and let's see what we can do, or, keep, using some other medication. They're going to refer. And so they're going to work together to be a care team for this person in these two different areas. Let's do that and say, how are we part of this team supporting our community? I'm doing this socially. I'm using my voice. I'm advocating for people in this way. You are a spiritual care advisor. You are a licensed twin, and we're all working together to support this family at church because they've got this going on, right? And how are we all have different skills and talents, different resources? And so I think we shouldn't be afraid to ask for help if we need it. We shouldn't be afraid to ask for help to better support someone else, right?
Yeah.
We shouldn't carry the burden of doing all the work.
All
There's
the things. Yeah.
people that want to help. There's other ways that are available, and let's do this together. Like, we're in this together.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so you gave a phone number earlier, a website.
Yep.
I'll link to all of that stuff in the show notes.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got some other local resources I can send you if you want a link to show notes, and then some online resources too.
Yep. We'll put all of that stuff in the show notes. Why don't you just list them out real quick too, just in case somebody's just listening? And yeah,
absolutely. So if you're local to Charleston, Dorchester, Berkeley, and you need domestic violence support, so that's for men and women. If you're 18 or older, support groups and other things for domestic violence. And again, that phone number is 843-744-3242. If you've experienced sexual assault and you need support, Tri-County Speaks is a great resource. They also have a support group for adults who experienced abuse as a child. So if you experienced child sexual abuse, but you are still coping with that, we are family, teenagers to like early 20s who are LGBTQ and need additional resource support groups. Norton Children's Advocacy Center and Dorchester Children's Advocacy Center support children who've been abused and have resources for families as well. Soon to come is the Berkeley County Children's Advocacy Center. They are currently building that site. Florence Crittenden, young moms or young pregnant women who need a safe place to stay and additional resources. The MUSC National Crime Victims Center is a great resource through MUSC. Origin SC also has family support services and financial literacy resources locally. They're awesome. Online kind of national resources would be the national hotline for domestic violence, which is 1-800-799-7233. So if you're anywhere in the U.S., if you're, looking for resources, to say you have a friend in California, you can call that number and say, I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, but my best friend is in Santa Cruz and needs help. They'd be able to look up the resource in that area. Okay, so that would be a really helpful thing. And then a couple websites, thehotline.org, loveisrespect.org, and joinonelove.org. Some educational resources for teens, for adults, for all different types of abuse. So really, really helpful resources.
Thank you, Sid.
Yeah. Thank you, Jesse.
I appreciate you. I'm so thankful for you.
Well, I'm thankful for you. Thank you for the chance to share.